Hi, my name's Frances Disley. I'm a multidisciplinary artist based in Liverpool, originally from Warrington. You can describe my work as socially engaged. I work a lot with people. That's an important part of my work, and I'm interested in the more than human world and how we can connect to it or retrack a prior relationship that we had with the more than human world. I am neurodivergent, recently diagnosed, and I'm interested in how that has impacted on the work that I make and the way that I've chosen to disseminate it. And lots of things are making sense for me now around why I make the work that I make, and yeah. So I'll reference that in the conversation. I've got 3 works or projects that I'd like to talk to you about that I thought would make sense for this talk today. And I will just talk to you initially about a project called the Love Letter to the Mystery. So this was a work that I made in 2021. The commission began during some of the COVID restrictions, and it's called Love Letter to the Mystery because it's a work about my local municipal park and my relationship to it as a consequence of lockdown. And I'm sure that's familiar to lots of people. I've always had a connection to plants, and it's always something that I've been kind of fascinated by. And I am interested in herbalism as a way to connect to plants and to reconnect with a moment when we had a closer connection with the plants that grow around us. I'm particularly fascinated in weeds and things that are seen as scruffy, things to be kind of like, or invasive, things to be that are generally like ripped out of spaces. And the more I found out about herbalism, they're actually like some of the key fundamental plants that are used within herbalism. I'm really like fascinated by how these plants seem to always turn up and are very forgiving, and feels like they follow us about even though we kind of try to push them away. So things like yarrow, that was used in the First World War as a styptic to staunch wounds, and dandelions, which are these amazing prebiotic and probiotic plants. And basically like the lockdown with my little kids using this local park just shifted my relationship and allowed me to kind of slow down. I say slow down, like with 2 little ones in lockdown, it wasn't the same experience for me as lots of other people. But anyway, this kind of like focus made me interested in how the idea of connecting with the plant world can be overwhelming because it's infinite. I mean, having a sense of that is useful anyway. But this, taking a patch of land and a really small patch of land and seeing what's growing there, and researching around the plants was a really like wonderful experience for me. So I wanted to make this work as a bit of a thank you. The work was commissioned by Invisible Dust, which is an arts organisation that connects artists with scientists. And I worked with a plant scientist based in Kew called Rebecca Lazarou, who has this amazing like insight into different worlds, where she works with scientists, and she works with herbalists, and she has this like one foot in the heavy scientific, and then this world that feels like it's on the periphery and is not necessarily acknowledged or embraced in the same way as the scientific. And I made a video that's a bit of an interview with her, and part of it is like was filmed in the Mystery, and it's exploring that historic relationship. I was interested in like how to form a relationship with plants. and the awkwardness and the kind of silliness of that. This how do you spend time with plants? That's something that I've been thinking about with neurodivergence as well. The idea of I have ADHD, and this kind of idea of like self-care and meditation and mindfulness fills me with absolute fear, because my mind is so busy and I need constant distraction. And if I spend too much time up in my mind, then like it can be really like problematic. So this idea of like, how do we do it practically? How do we connect with this stuff? So I made a video work, which I'll show you a little bit of if I can. It's a beautiful thing. Sorry. So this kind of, these are these aerial shots of the Mystery. So it's a municipal park. There's loads of grand, amazing Victorian parks in Liverpool, and the Mystery is probably seen as quite plain and boring in comparison to them. But it's amazing because if you're like, these are cleavers, which are this wonderful kind of spring tonic, and hawthorn. There's all these wonderful plants. I kind of encourage anyone to really to slow down and, well, not slow down, but basically take the time to kind of play. So that's an element in the video as well. I invited 2 people to come to a studio and play with these plants. This is one of my favorites. It's ribwort plantain, which is used for all sorts of wonderful things, and it's definitely overlooked. It was described in Native America as by Native Americans as white man's footsteps, because when people from Europe like traveled to North America, they'd left like plantain where they'd walked. It was then adopted as a snake bite remedy. So it kind of feels like it's had this strange journey and this connection, and yeah, I kind of find it really fascinating. I also talked to Michael Smythe in the video, which is the person that runs Phytology, an amazing medicinal wildlife space in Bethnal Green in London, and Andrew Koo, who's an artist and apiarist and gardener based in Liverpool. So the work feels like an attempt to reconnect and play with the more than human world in a really literal sense. And this is like, it's kind of like this homage to the Mystery or Wavertree Park, the place that I used quite a lot during lockdown. I will try to go to another slide now. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about the second project, which is called Gwrth a Mi, Wrth Afon, which translates from Welsh into English as Meet Me by the River. So I was invited by Mostyn Gallery to make a work that engaged with community. We were talking initially about people set back from the coastline that during lockdown were feeling isolated and disconnected. We ended up working with 2 groups of people. One of them was a Well Women group based in Llandudno, and another group called Cymdeithas Edward Clwyd, which was a group of people loosely based around Llanrwst that were a Welsh-speaking group that were undertaking nature walks and considering plant names in Welsh and like the historic connection. So I was interested in networks that occur in nature that enable plants to thrive and share nourishment, and thinking about how these networks can exist in human communities and how these things can kind of intersect between the land and the people living in North Wales. So in really simple terms, we basically the connecting underpinning was this idea of following the Conwy River, which is this amazing river that starts in the heathland and goes through an ancient forests and then down to the wetland where it meets the coast. So we formed a club. So I was working with the engagement part of Mostyn Gallery in Llandudno, and we just came up with this idea of getting to know the plants that follow the river with this group of people. So we'd get to know each other as a consequence as well. We worked with a couple of botanists, so they made they came along with some of the walks. I think it's really interesting to engage with people that have lived in a place alongside the more than human world, and like valuing that knowledge that comes over time. So like when you visited a place repeatedly. In terms of neurodivergence, I suffer from social anxiety massively. I struggle with small talk and things that are unpredictable. And I love the idea of something that has a structure and a purpose. And it's kind of like this set of workshops that we do, and we come together in these moments, and everybody has a role and a purpose. Also, this idea of distraction, like walking for me and looking at the plants is a wonderful kind of accompaniment to the social connection that occurs. We made a big point as well of like making it accessible, so that this was something that really stood out. Everybody involved in the groups were given ways to get to these remote places on public transport as well, because it can feel like they're really inaccessible, but there are ways to get there. We made sure that the wanders were kind of gentle. And we made this kind of like this discovery along the way. I'm really interested in shared learning and embracing amateurism. I'm fascinated by, I'm interested in breaking down barriers to connecting with the green stuff. So there's lots of gatekeepers, I feel, and people feel like they're not green fingered, or socio-economically they can't afford a back garden, so they feel like they're not part of that community or that sort of relationship. And I think it's really interesting to try and push against that and think about the things that grow around us, referencing that work beforehand. So it doesn't feel like I feel like there's something radical we could do to break down the barriers and reconnect with like a historic time where people felt more empowered about their relationship to plants in the plant world. North Wales is really interesting as well, because it's one of those places that lots of people travel to, and they kind of like people are always stomping up a mountain or like turning it on for the weekend, and it's a place that people that say, travel to get a bit of nature, and then they switch it off and go home. And it kind of felt really nice to be like, we're just going to slow down, we're going to see what's growing, we're going to really like spend our time here, and I suppose honor it in a way. But anyway, we had a set of workshops, wonders, and then we had moments where we'd come together and we'd look at the plants that we found. So people were sharing memories. Fanwy, one of the people that came along for the wonders, remembers using these rushes as like candles. We had like ×10 magnifiers. And I found like from the workshops, when I tried to do too much that was really complicated, then it became really problematic. And some of the best sessions we had, we literally sat and looked through a magnifier at the plants that we found. And it was amazing. Like there was lots of kind of sensory stuff going on with like, we wandered through a ancient forest and took our socks off and felt the sphagnum moss under our feet. We made pigments and dyes from the plant matter. That's Yona having a look at some of the moss that grows in moss, and lichen is really responsive to air quality. So it grows in different ways, like dependent on location, and high up in the heathland there were these amazing mosses. We made things and we played and painted, and the culmination of it was this space that kind of acted as a resource in the gallery. So, and there were video works as well. So, you know, if you can't access the gallery, or you couldn't access these wild spaces, we tried to kind of interpret or communicate this experience. So the back wall is kind of playfully dyed and painted, which is something that I kind of laid down, and then we used some of the remnants of the sessions. So the space was like a really interactive space as well, which is something I love. I really struggle, as a lot of people do, but particularly as a neurodivergent person, to be in a gallery space and not know what to do with myself. I get really distracted, and I need a distraction and I don't know what to do with myself. So there's all these activities. So you're invited to play with the paints, and it had this kind of softness and familiarity, which hopefully felt like it was an invitation to remain and spend some time. We made a video work as well, but I won't. I'll let you find that for yourselves, which kind of explored, which shows our wonders and our discoveries. Yeah, so along the way. So it felt like it was a really important project for me, because through both of those projects, I started them by thinking, what can I add to this? Like, how is my voice useful in this? It, like, especially working with Rebecca Lazarou and the work before, and then with this work, it was kind of like, I'm used to working with urban weeds, and there's this vastness and greenness, this that was overwhelming in North Wales, but it was kind of like, okay, so how do we deal with the overwhelm? How do we find entry points? So the offer, I think, was really simplistic, and I think sometimes that can be the best thing when you don't kind of. I'm interested in decentering myself as well as an artist, so it was less about me and it was more about us coming together and making discoveries. I'm interested. I think I mentioned before about that self-care idea. I'm interested in how that works in a community, how we can collectively care, and fascinating for me, because, like I say, I have crushing social anxiety and I struggle to connect. So I'm interested in how we can make connections that are neurodivergent friendly. Yeah. So if I will try and move on to another image. So I'll talk really briefly about the last project that I wanted to talk about, which is started with the Turnpike Gallery in Leigh. It was commissioned by the Turnpike Gallery in Leigh. And it started as a project to set up a community garden. So outside of the Turnpike Gallery, which is also a one-stop shop and a library, so based in Leigh, they have like I'd worked with the gallery before, and we'd been talking about notions of how to set up a community garden and whether we could do something on the roof and all these things. And right in front of our eyes were these flower beds that have been in for, since the space was set up, and they were populated by annuals put in by the council that come with their water truck, and they water them. We're like, okay, why don't we just use these? We circumvent this infrastructure that's already in place. Somebody comes and waters them, but put in plants that have these other uses that can live for longer than 1 year, and the energy output is completely different in relation to them. So I set up like an idea for it, which kind of reflected the community and the use of the building. So there was a tea bed, which was aimed at the staff and anyone using the building. So everything was safe to just pop in some boiling water, no counterindications in them. So like they have medicinal properties, but there's nothing that's going to have a counterindication with prior health conditions. There was an inks and dyes bed, which was plants that could be utilized for making art materials, referencing the activity that's going on instead. There was a first aid bed, so this is kind of full of medicinals. And then it's not on these slides, but there was also a calming bed, which was acknowledging the stress that can come along with visiting the one-stop shop and the council shop, and there was another aromatics bed. So it was all about scent. So this idea that you could have these different levels of encounters with these garden beds. Some of them you're conscious of, and some of them you're not. Working on it was amazing. People were coming up and talking to me, saying, "Oh, my mum had that. Like, I love this, and what you're doing, this is wonderful." And it felt like it broke down a threshold barrier that you often struggle with galleries about trying to engage people or getting people in. I feel like the more than human world can be an entry point or like a connection point between people. And it just kind of, it was amazing. I was going to reference back to the more than human world. I love the idea of, so the more than human world is a phrase that's used as a substitution for the idea of nature. I still feel like it's problematic in itself because it's othering. So it's simplifying something that is entirely complex. But it was coined by eco-philosopher and cultural ecologist David Abram, and he was trying to counteract this idea of nature describes humans as a juxtaposition. So it's as if it's not, we sit kind of above it somehow. And he described it as nature, this wild and breathing animate world, as a place that holds humans with their culture and their technology. So this idea that we live within this more than human world, it's problematic to me because it's reductive and it's too easy to kind of like describe this vastness that's key to everything in such a sort of a simple way. So the work evolved into this book, which is called Talk to the Garden, which talks about, it's a bit of a anti-garden book in a way. So it's kind of referencing that thing that I mentioned before about the exclusivity of like the idea of a garden, and this idea of like humans that control or take credit for the things that plants do. And it was designed in a way as a catalyst to set up a community garden and things you need to think about. So the idea of dreaming of a garden, remembering, connecting with childhood, noticing, so this like specificity, planning, community, sowing seeds. And all of the chapters were introduced by a different plant that I felt like connected with the content. So remembering is dandelion, which kind of I think is commonly associated with childhood and play. And then I kind of spoke on behalf of the plant, and then I invited lots of different amazing people to write sections within it. This is by Roy Parker around non-monetary exchange. There was an interview with Rashika Ahmad, who runs Community Apothecary in London. I made a font which is inspired by all these different plants. Yeah, so it's this kind of it's a bit of a provocation, I suppose. So all of these other and it's full of like games as well. So there's lots of things in it with things for you to do. I will reference my neurodivergence again. I struggle with books, and I've always struggled to read. So it's really kind of funny for me to write a book. So there's loads of different textures to it. So it's kind of playful and interactive, and it's kind of like this. One of the activities is noticing the plants that I did a plant walk around my block. I live on a terraced street in Liverpool, and then there's like an invitation to do that yourself. Anyway, so that's my talk. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.